Is getting a lot of attention as I guess the party favorite, right? Maybe. I guess that's how you'd say it. The establishment favorite, maybe?
Yeah.
Corlin Sykes has been on our show a couple of times. He also wants to run against Claire McCaskill for the Senate race here in Missouri. Our next guest has also joined the fray. We haven't had a chance to talk with him. He's from the Kansas City side of the state. Austin Petersen, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, McGraw and Kelly.
When you come to St. Louis, are you going to stop by the studio, or are you going to small-time us and just hang out on the phone all the time?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm so big and important. I'm sure I'll find time, guys.
Okay, good. Appreciate it. Well, let's get some current news straight ahead. What do you think of this budget deal going on in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of sick and tired of the Republicans trying to paint the actual conservatives as if they are the radicals when they are the ones who campaigned just 5 years ago at the height of the Tea Party frenzy to be constitutional conservatives who believed in reining in spending. So I've got to stand with Rand Paul on this one. We need to have some spending cuts. So we don't have trillion-dollar deficits. I think that the people who believe that we need to spend $1 trillion a year are actually the radicals here.
For those who weren't up at 3 o'clock in the morning, Rand Paul was on the on the floor of the U.S. Senate saying, "Why do Obama deficits matter and Republican deficits not matter?" You agree with that?
Completely agree. And, I was a big fan of passing the tax cuts, and I think that a lot of Missourians are benefiting from that. Of course, Claire McCaskill voted against it. But if you don't pass spending cuts, it's just going to mean a tax increase down the road. We need to cut taxes, absolutely, but we need to get our fiscal house in order and get some real across-the-board spending cuts so that we can have the kind of sustained growth that won't lead to future tax increases.
Austin Petersen, somebody who was an expert at the budget would say to you, 70 to 75% of the budget is untouchable because it's entitlements. Who cares what happens to the other 25%? It's the 75% that you have to cut. Are you willing to make cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security to solve this problem?
Yes, and I think that you don't have to come in with a sort of a hack and slash approach. There are a lot of very reasonable reforms that could be made to get the fiscal house in order. One of the really simple ones I think you could institute is just raise the retirement age for Social Security, just 2 to 4 years. It wasn't originally intended to be a welfare program that lasts 15 years at the end of your life. It was supposed to be something if you were destitute. So even if you just raised it 2 years, that could result in significant cuts to the spending on the programs. And so we've got to start talking about what's actually reasonable and possible. I mean, they never should have passed these programs in the first place. But now that we have them, we have to deal with them. And there are some common sense approaches, like I said, just increasing the retirement age or means testing, for example. Or if you have over $150,000 a year in income from investments that you've saved up over your life, maybe not getting Social Security is something that we could be talking about. I mean, isn't that reasonable? Shouldn't it really be for people who can't make a living on their own at the end of their life?
Well, don't you then disincentivize people to save? Right? If I'm smart and I save my money all these years, right, and I end up with a nice nest egg at the end, I've been paying into Medicare all these years. Now I don't get it because I was frugal with my money in my 40s and 50s?
Listen, I didn't make these promises, okay? I'm 36 years old. These promises were made before I was born. If you want to send somebody to Washington, D.C. who's going to keep the status quo, you got plenty of people in this race, or you could send Claire McCaskill back. If I go to Washington, D.C. next year, I'm going to be the guy who actually keeps his promises, unlike the Attorney General who I'm running against, who, when his promise was inconvenient to him about not running for higher office, he broke that promise immediately. But I got a track record of 10 years of fighting for fiscal conservatism. So if you want somebody who's going to do what they say, send me to Washington, D.C., so Rand Paul doesn't have to stand alone on the Senate floor by himself making these fights by himself.
Why is it, Austin Petersen, that conservatives continue to send people to Washington to rein in spending for 30 years now, and they don't rein in spending? What is it about? Now, let's forget the Democrats for a second. Let's talk about your party. Why is it that when they go to Washington, they can't rein in spending?
a lot of them get really comfortable in the positions of power that they have. There's a lot of perks to being a United States senator. A lot of times, in order for them to get reelected, they have to make deals with special interests that put them in office. I mean, the difference between myself and the other Republican who's in this race is that I don't have the backing of people like Senator Mitch McConnell. So if I go to Washington, D.C. next year, there's no strings attached. I mean, I've got twice as many donors as Josh Hawley. I've got more than the entire Republican primary field combined, and I've raised a sizable war chest, $50 a time, from grassroots people. So if you're not owned by the special interests, if you're not owned by the establishment of your party, then you can do what you say you will do. I mean, Senator Rand Paul is a perfect example of that. Mitch McConnell opposed him in the primary, just like McConnell is opposing me. So when Rand got to Washington, he could do what the voters who sent him there would do. And so a lot of it has to do with the special interests. A lot of it has to do with the dark money side of things. But also the way that the Republican leadership meddles in primaries and picks the candidate. Whenever those candidates, those Mitch McConnell-aligned candidates get to Washington, they owe him a lot of favors. And they have to do when you take the king's coin, you have to sing the king's song.
Where are you on Donald Trump?
You know what? I was a skeptic of Donald Trump before he was elected because he had a lot of conflicting statements of things that didn't sound constitutional conservative. But you know what? A politician's never going to tell you when they're wrong, but a statesman will. And I am so happy to have been proven wrong by a lot of the very conservative measures he's taken. The amount of regulations that he has blocked versus his predecessors, George Bush and Barack Obama, ought to make any liberty conservative who believes in limited government just be absolutely delighted. So I'm excited. And you're never going to agree with somebody 100%. And when I've disagreed with the president, I've said so. I always say, Frederick Douglass once said, I will stand with anyone to do right and with no one to do wrong. And that's what my stance has always been. But I've been pleasantly surprised to see that the president has done wonderful things like getting Neil Gorsuch in there.
All right, hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
You got to give Mitch McConnell Neil Gorsuch, don't you?
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, the president plays a small role in that.
Well, hold on a second. No. But Mitch McConnell took the slings and arrows and didn't sign off on Obama's pick for 13, 14, 15 months.
Sure.
So you have to give McConnell that.
Broken clocks are right. Yeah, okay. Broken clocks are right twice a day, I guess.
All right. Now, secondly, McConnell might have passed this Senate bill that's going to blow up the deficit, right? But President Trump's going to sign it. So why is Trump the genius and McConnell the bad guy?
Well, they're both complicit, and the thing is that President Trump never has claimed to be a deficit hawk or to be a
but you are
fiscal issues.
But you are.
Yeah, and I disagree with him on that. I also disagreed with him when he signed the reauthorization of FISA recently, and I've said so. So just like I said, when I disagree with the president, I'm going to say so. But I think overall he's done a lot of good. Senator McConnell is the one who's really got all the power here because it's the legislature that is originating these bills and putting on the president's desk. You have to understand the mindset of Trump, and I think after a year in office, I have a better understanding for where he's at. He's not an ideologue, okay? He's not the type of person who's going to sit around and try and compare his philosophy to the legislation that's coming across his desk. He's a businessman who wants to make deals, which makes it imperative that we have good legislatures because I think he's going to sign pretty much any bill that comes across his desk with some reasonable restraints. But for me, I mean, again, I'm not saying, he's a genius when it comes to legislation or how he managed to get Gorsuch in there. I'm giving the guy credit where it's due. And, yeah, when McConnell does something right, I'll give him credit where it's due. But, frankly, I'm focused on what I'm trying to push, legislation that I'm for, and that's really what I'm focused on so I can serve the interests of the citizens of Missouri, not just the personalities of one or two people in Washington.
The conventional wisdom, though, Austin Petersen, is to run against the establishment. And Mitch McConnell is the establishment. Donald Trump is the anti-establishment. So it's not that hard to sort of criticize Mitch McConnell and to praise Donald Trump. So my question to you is here. Give me something that you believe that is unpopular within your party.
That's a really good question. Well, probably the first one is that I am in total opposition to the current approach that we have to criminal justice reform. Now, some Republicans have taken the lead on this issue, but I frankly think that the federal war on drugs has been a disaster, and many of my Republicans disagree. I sat with my mother for a year when I was 15 years old while she suffered from cancer. while I carried her bags of vomit from the couch to the toilet. And if I had thought that there had been some sort of medicine that would have alleviated her symptoms, should I really be a prisoner? Should I really go to jail for 5 or 10 years for trying to help someone who is suffering? So I think we need to stop looking at the federal war on drugs as a criminal issue and look at it as if it were a medical issue, which is really what it is. And we need to look at a constitutional approach to it. It doesn't need to be a federal issue. It should go back to the states. So that's probably something where my fellow Republicans would disagree with me on, but I happen to think that we didn't have proper constitutional authority for it, and frankly, we need criminal justice reform.
So you're in favor of legalizing medical marijuana?
I'm in favor of letting the states decide, right? Somebody the other day at a Republican meeting was like, Austin, so you think people should smoke marijuana? And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the federal government never had the proper constitutional authority, that the states have elected to make it legal in some cases, both medical and recreational. The federal government has better things to do. We should stop putting police officers' lives in danger by having them enforce these victimless crimes, and we should respect the will of the states of the 9th and the 10th Amendment of the Constitution.
Okay. So if it's a states' rights issue, do you think, as a representative of Missouri or as a citizen of Missouri, Missourians or Missouri should be at least a medical marijuana state? Would you be in favor of that if Missouri were to put that on the ballot?
As a citizen of Missouri, I would support that, and part of the reason is because I speak to a lot of veterans who come back with PTSD, and rather than taking opioids, which have proven to be pretty harmful in recent days, they would prefer to use that as a medical alternative. And even President Trump has come out and said that he supports the right to try legislation so that people can choose what sort of drugs that they want to take in order to alleviate their suffering. And so I'm not going to be in the business of telling people who are sick or suffering or dying like my mother did when I was a young man to say that, oh, you're a prisoner, we're going to throw you in jail if you decide to use this. So yes, I would, as a private citizen of Missouri, support that.
What about recreational marijuana?
Well, again, that's going to have to be up to the citizens of Missouri.
I know you're a citizen. You're a citizen of Missouri.
Yeah.
Would you be in favor of it?
Yeah, I would. And the reason why is because I think that we create dangerous drug gangs and cartels. Just like we did with alcohol. I think the problem is that what you're doing is, if you're worried about MS-13 gangs coming up across the border, it's the Baptist and bootleggers approach, right? The bootleggers or the new MS-13. These are dangerous cartels that are created because of our violent prohibitionist war. It's never going to be legal to use drugs or alcohol and get behind the wheel of a car, and I would never advocate that. And we should never allow it to be placed into the hands of children, just like we don't with alcohol right now. But if you're not free to make mistakes in this life, then you're not really free at all. And I actually believe that people should have personal responsibility, but with some limits. Again, you can't drive, you can't get behind the wheel of a car. But yes, I do actually believe that my fellow citizens are adults who are capable of making adult decisions for themselves.
Austin Petersen, is Ann Wagner going to get in the race?
Well, I hope not. She's really, she'd be a tough one. I mean, she's a very credible public servant. But really what the Ann Wagner rumors have to do with is the fact that Josh Hawley's floundering. I mean, I think he's not ready for prime time. You heard his comments last week, and he's either pandering or he's an idiot because his comments were blatantly wrong. And so a lot of people, I believe, have buyer's remorse, which is why they're trying to push Ann Wagner into the race. Nobody's going to raise more money than Claire McCaskill, not even Ann Wagner if she gets in. You're going to have the grassroots on your back. You're going to have the people on your side, and you're going to have to work hard for it. Josh Hawley hasn't even held a campaign event yet. He's not raising money like they expected. I'm all over the state. You got to have somebody who's going to go out there and make the case to voters. Stop writing Claire McCaskill's fundraising emails for her, like my opponents Cortland and Hawley have been doing. Hit her where she's weak on the fiscal issues. Hit her where she's weak where she reauthorized FISA. That's how we're going to get her out of there.
What comments are you referring to with Josh Hawley that you find not appropriate?
Well, he tried to make it sound as if sex trafficking was something that started up in the 1960s and 70s because of the sexual revolution. Whether you think that's right or wrong, one, factually it's incorrect. They call it the world's oldest profession for a reason. And two, this is the war that Claire McCaskill wants. She wants to fight a Todd Aiken-style culture war so that she can go out there and rile up her base and fundraise like she's been doing. So don't let her have that. It doesn't matter if you agree with Josh or not. It's not the issue. What the issue is fighting the enemy on the ground where they're weak. She voted against the tax bill. Focus on her weakness. She voted for FISA. A lot of college students who are Democrats think that she's bad on civil liberties and criminal justice reform. A liberty Republican who can punch her on the right from her fiscal issues and then hit her on the left in the general election on her lack of standing up for criminal justice reform and civil liberties. That's the ticket. But when Josh Hawley goes down the Todd Aiken route, he's giving her the fundraising emails. He's riling up her base. And did you know, McGraw, did you know women actually can vote? Did you know that they have opinions? They actually show up to vote too. So you might want to not tick off half of the electorate. Let's stick to where we're strong as Republicans. Let's hit her on her tax vote. Let's hit her on her FISA vote. Let's win this thing, and let's turn Missouri red.
Austin Petersen, it already is red. You want? Oh, well, okay, never mind. I want to clean up something you said earlier. You said that I want to make sure. I don't want you to. I want to clean up what you said. You meant Josh Hawley's comments were idiotic. You don't mean Josh Hawley's an idiot.
Well, here's the thing. He was wrong. So if the guy went to Yale, he's got to know that that's not true. So is he pandering? Do you think?
But
do you think he's pandering?
You called him an idiot. That's pretty harsh language. You mean his comments might be incorrect. You don't really mean to call him an idiot, do you?
Well, I'll take the correction and thank you for it.
No, I mean I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to clarify. You didn't really mean to call him an idiot.
Right. His comments are idiotic.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to cause controversy is what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to avoid it. So, and I wanted your comments to be taken for what they were and not out of context or anything else. So there you go. I was actually trying to keep you from creating controversy. Maybe that's what you were trying to do, or whatever.
Maybe I need a controversy because that's the thing is that's what gets these little known candidates a lot of attention when you say wild things and then you end up just like Roy Moore did. We don't need to go down that path. We need to stick to the issues and let's go after Claire. At the end of the day, we're all going to have to work together, McGraw. So again, thanks so much, Kelly. Thanks so much. You guys are doing a great job, and I'd love to see you when I got us sing.
You're always welcome here, sir. Thank you for your time. Austin Petersen going against Josh Hawley.